going to talk about the history and the revitalizing industries of hemp. Now, the reality is, of course, that many of you may have heard this or seen this type of information before, but it's really important that we keep getting it out there and that it keeps getting into our brains a little bit more every time. So I didn't get to hear all of that introduction, but I'm going to assume it was just amazing. Let's talk for a minute about what is cannabis really. It's all one plant, but with some very important distinctions, legal distinctions, and of course, the ability to be intoxicating distinctions. And it is that intoxication factor that dictates the legal distinction. So we have two basically types of cannabis, even though it is all one plant. One is that oilseed fiber and extract type, the non-intoxicating extract type that we call hemp. It's a low resin, non-intoxicating form of cannabis. It's generally cultivated from seed and generally mechanized cultivation and harvesting. In the United States, a cannabis plant is hemp if it contains not greater than 0.3% delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol or delta 9 THC, which we commonly discuss as THC. And then of course we have other forms of cannabis, medical and adult use cannabis, otherwise known as cannabis, pot, marijuana, ganja, that is a high resin intoxicating crop. Intoxicating with an asterisk there, because if it's for a topical application and doesn't break the blood-brain barrier, there is definitely no intoxication. And there are certainly cannabinoids we can get out of this that have no intoxication. But if we take that full spectrum hemp extract, marijuana extract, believe me, intoxication is going to occur. We call the different kinds strains and chemovars, and they're generally cultivated by clones with human cultivation and harvesting. Obviously, we're not talking about big ag, thousands and thousands of acres like we do for hemp, and we'll learn about more about why we would use so many acres for this incredible useful crop. I also wanted to share with you some pictures so you could get a general idea of different types of cannabis. So here on the far left of your screen, we see hemp that's sown for fiber. See how closely planted together it is, sometimes 200 to 300 plants per square meter, no real branches or noting, and everything is very uniform, not a lot of leaves, lends itself very well to processing. It's the longest, strongest biocellulose in the world, and I'm so excited to teach you about that as we move on. Then we see hemp sown for grain. Next to that, see those shorter stalks, because hemp actually is a hungry crop for nitrogen and other nutrients in the soil. And so when you are growing just for grain, you see that those in Canada, they bred their hemp grain down so it's just about 3 feet tall, so that stalk is not taking up valuable nutrients unnecessarily from the soil. And then we see those thick colas filled with nutrient-dense seeds, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. Then we see in the United States how we grow hemp for cannabinoids, and it starts to look more horticultural operation. And certainly there aren't thousands of acres of hemp sown for extract. We see about one plant for every 1.5 square meters, non-intoxicating with various resin ranges. And then to your far right, you see a legal medical adult use cannabis grow in the state of Washington. So let's get into the history of it, guys. Our own George Washington said, make the most of the Indian hemp seed and sow it everywhere. And of course was a hemp farmer, as was everybody back then, because, and we'll get there in a second. First, want to also ponder the tremendous and obvious history in the United States for this versatile, valuable crop when we consider Hempstead, Long Island, Hempstead County, Arkansas, Hempstead, Texas, Hemp Hill, North Carolina, Hempfield, Pennsylvania, just to name a few. That was not by mistake. That was not folks just copying things that were happening in England, though bear in mind, those towns from England were named those towns because of the hemp that was being grown. So why did I say that George Washington and everybody back then was growing cannabis? Well, because our nation's first cannabis law was way back in 1619 in the Jamestown colony, ordering farmers to make trial of, which means grow, the Indian hemp seed. It was so important to the security of our country. In fact, it's very important to understand that we wouldn't have a country. The Mayflowers, sails, rigging, clothing, even the oakum between the boards of the boat, all was hemp. That is the fiber, that is the biocellulose and the fiber that is available and strong and stands up to seawater and all of those things that allowed that kind of sea travel. So Americans' very rich hemp history and hemp. Hemp was legal tender in most of the United States up until the early 1800s, and we paid our taxes with it. From 1763 to 1767, during periods of shortage where our nation's security was threatened because we had a shortage of this important fiber, in parts of Virginia, farmers could even be jailed in America for not producing hemp during those periods. Now, I'm going to skip to the War of 1812 for just a minute. And that is the fact that no country, even to this day, China, which has clearly has the huge market in hemp right now with textiles and all kinds of fiber materials that they grow, even they still are not growing enough hemp. They're actually importing hemp from the United States right now, if you can believe that, fiber grown for textiles so that they can make weaves of US grown hemp in China. In any event, to underscore this point, in the War of 1812, Napoleon invaded Russia to cut off the English Navy's supply of hemp, and it crippled the English Navy. It was a very strategic and successful maneuver. And we're going to stick a pin in that, and we'll get to a future slide of how that again is repeated here against the United States in World War II. But moving on back to the United States history here, in 1850, the US Census indicates there were 8,327 hemp plantations in the United States. Now, these hemp plantations were defined as plantations no less than 2,000 acres. So the reality is that the census did not even capture all of the much smaller farms and family farms that were littered across the United States. What happened is better living through chemistry happened. Now, we had to go through it, guys. Humanity, we explore, we use our minds, we figure out how to make things better, faster, stronger. And we thought that maybe all of these volatile organic chemicals and other chemicals, inorganic chemicals that we're creating would make the world a better place. And it made the world an easier place, but a terribly toxic place. And we are paying for all of that now. But when that happens, patents are created. So bear in mind the four basic linchpins of prohibition were, first of all, the cotton gin was invented in the late 18th century. That put forth a massive special interest in fiber wars and fiber agriculture in the United States. Additionally, in 1925, we had 5 pages of cannabis preparations in the US Pharmacopoeia. They weren't patented, but they worked and they were very popular. In fact, I have co-edited the Cannabis Compendium, which subtitle is The Golden Age of the Cannabis Apothecary, 1850 to 1937, when in fact also the entire essential oil industry was also under the same attack as cannabis, because they are botanical extracts, which form the basis of pharmaceuticals, which were coming in and creating patents and then needed to stuff out the competition. So in any event, 1925, 5 pages of these cannabis preparations. But in 1927, we figured out how to separate salicylic acid from willow bark. That created the first aspirin, the first analgesic competition to cannabis preparations. And therein lies the massive effort to then tax and regulate at first hemp and all forms of cannabis out of existence. The other 2 linchpins, so we've talked about the cotton gin, we've talked about cannabis preparations. The other 2 would be paper making, right? The whole world supply of hemp for thousands of years, the whole world supply of paper for thousands of years was hemp, and of course some rice as well. But for longevity, everyone knew, every culture, and it started in China, hemp keeps the longevity of the product, whether it's paper, whether it's fiber, a building material, plastic, etc. So when that wood craft, K-R-A-F-T, a German word for strength, patent was created to make paper out of wood cellulose. That, of course, needed to snuff out the competition, hemp. Additionally, we would say that DuPont, or petroleum synthetic polymer based plastics, nylons, and then of course fuels, all of that had patents and needed to be make money, because it's such a huge investment making the R&D, getting the patents, and now you've got to snuff out the competition. So essentially in 1930, then Secretary of the Treasury Andrew Mellon of Mellon Bank and of Alcoa, toxic aluminum factory, all kinds of chemicals and products that they were making, synthetic products. he appointed Henry Anslinger to be the executive director of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, the FBN, which we know today as the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. And between 1930 and 1937, there was a very successful social engineering campaign really throughout the world and obviously throughout the United States, talking about this street scourge, marijuana, which did not actually exist at the time. Certainly marijuana did, cannabis absolutely did, but it being a street scourge did not. In fact, racism was also used to snuff out and to create this social engineering campaign. And that's why they chose the word marijuana, a beautiful Spanish word, as opposed to the word cannabis, which is what it is, which is certainly what had been referred to throughout. So they also used racism in the form of African Americans and jazz singers and Negroes and Filipinos, and doing this campaign that the Negro jazz singer is going to think that he is good enough for your wife, your white wife, and your white wife is going to think that he's wonderful. And so, and of course, all of this ridiculous racism and social engineering combined with our sexuality was very effective. So by the time 1937 rolls around and 3 hearings take place in the United States chambers of Congress after hours. And those archives, by the way, those transcripts are still available in our nation's archives. They are fascinating. They are heartbreaking. We have the American Medical Association coming in, and I've had to testify at these types of hearings, and you're very nervous and you're preparing for these hearings. The last thing you want is a last minute hearing that you're not prepared for, but there was no due process here. So after hours, you can almost picture in your mind, if you're familiar with the process, this Dr. Bob Woodward from the American Medical Association running in to this hearing to try to advocate on behalf of the medical profession and American patients and citizens who rely on this safe and effective for decades and centuries medicine. And so he says, please, why are we using the term marijuana in these formal proceedings? And why are we discussing this street scourge? I'm a doctor and I'm not aware of the street scourge of which you speak. Could we please use the term cannabis in these formal proceedings? And he is completely ignored by Henry Anslinger, who is actually leading those 3 after hours non-due process hearings in the halls of Congress, because poor Dr. Woodward has no idea that he is but a miniature cog in a great big giant wheel that has been conspiring for some years to just roll right over him and that safe and effective medicine that he and so many other doctors and citizens relied upon. So in any event, the Marijuana Tax Act passes in 1937. A restrictive federal tax is created. Hemp is conflated with marijuana on purpose. It's marijuana that has basically taken the fall for hemp, which is really the true that. Pharmaceuticals are afraid of marijuana. All of the other industries are afraid of hemp. The tax allows for hemp production, but farmers move on to other crops because they have to meet demands, and hemp is getting snuffed out. So hemp products and the import of raw materials remain legal, but resins extracted from hemp are excluded from the definition. Now, despite this, in 1938, apologies, apparently there is a siren going by here, guys. Thank you. Despite what happens in 1937, R&D is really moving along with hemp. And in fact, the 1938 Popular Mechanics magazine talks about the $1 billion crop. Now, back then, America was the #1 importer of hemp materials and hemp manufactured goods. And to this day, we still are. That has not changed. It's been nearly 100 years, and we've just got the stuff re-legalized. So let me go page down here. Oh, there we go. And in 1941, Popular Mechanics, and I actually have, that's my own copy of the magazine. I am proud to own 2 copies of this. We were getting involved in the war, right? It's 1941, World War II is happening, and we see pinch hitters for defense. When I look at Popular Mechanics, and I learned so much just about our US history, looking at that magazine from a cultural perspective, what I learned was, wow, we were really a population of patriots and conservationists. And that is where we need to return again, guys. Better, faster, stronger, of being a society of patriots, not blind patriotism, informed patriotism, and conservation. And so we see here that the whole entire magazine issue is really, particularly this focused article, Pinchotter's Defense, talking about industrialists who were creating renewable resources. They didn't call them renewable resources back then. They didn't say, bio resins back then. They described this car that Henry Ford created as the car that Henry Ford, quote, grew from the soil with its plastics, panels, and impact strength 10 times greater than hemp. Now, steel. They were made from flax, wheat, hemp, and spruce pulp. Now, I am going to take a moment, guys, to get this. Stop sharing for a second. We are going to take, and it's only 30 seconds here. It's not the 2.5 minutes that I made you suffer through during the Freedom Call on Monday night. I really want you to see Henry Ford's car, what really was going on with what we mean when we talk about this impact strength. So just one moment here while I share that screen, and thank you for your patience as I do this. I promise it'll be worth your while. Here we go.
Amongst the thousands of products made from hemp, one of the most extraordinary is Henry Ford's plastic car. Built in 1941, it contained cellulose fibers derived from hemp, sisal, and wheat straw. The plastic was lighter than steel, yet could withstand 10 times the impact without denting.
An entire transformation of what we are relying upon, because hemp on the microcosm level, on the microscopic level, is stronger than steel. It is actually strong. It's second in strength only to graphite whiskers and carbon nanotubes, which are so expensive that it's barely possible to perform R&D on those man-made materials. And here we can make them from hemp, and we can do it through pyrolysis. So in any event, remember I asked you to stick a pin in that Napoleon invading Russia during the War of 1812 to cripple the English Navy's supply of hemp? Well, Japanese invaded Manila, which is where we were getting all of our hemp from for the United States Navy, particularly in that we had taxed and regulated hemp out of existence just 5 years earlier in 1937. So when the Japanese strategically and successfully crippled the United States Navy by attacking Manila and cutting us off from our supply of hemp, that caused the United States Department of Agriculture to create a film called Hemp for Victory in 1942. If you get on YouTube when you're either bored or if you're super curious and excited, and I certainly hope it's the latter and not the former, get on YouTube, search Hemp for Victory, pick the one that is only about 13.5 or 14 minutes long, so you don't get some hippie's dissertation on the film, because it will really blow your mind. And if there are folks that you're trying to inspire, or hearts and minds that you're trying to change about this incredible, versatile, valuable crop, this is an incredible way to do it, is to show them Hemp for Victory. I helped former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard draft a very important bill called the Hemp for Victory Act. It's so important. It directed the Department of Defense and all U.S. agencies. In case you're not aware, the United States is the largest purchaser of goods in the entire world. And the agency within the United States government that is the largest purchaser is, of course, the U.S. Department of Defense, which clearly has a very rich history in the desperate, necessary need for this fiber and this plant. So that bill actually directed the DoD and all other agencies to take stock and actually analyze all of the things that they buy, decide which of those products can be made based with hemp or blended with hemp, and then to move forward with research doing that, and then use that information for the Small Business Administration and our financial institutions as what a safe bet it is to lend into the hemp industry. So in any event, Until the war ended, the United States government distributed this 400,000 pounds of hemp seeds to American farmers from basically coast-ish to coast, and they produced 42,000 tons of hemp fiber annually until the war ended. Now, what comes up legally after that is the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. So we've moved from 1937 Marijuana Tax Act to the 1970 Controlled Substances Act. Now, the Nixon administration did not alter the definition of marijuana one bit, not any punctuation, nothing at all, just adopted that 1937 definition wholesale. And so as a result, of course, hemp remained conflated with marijuana, and was placed on a Schedule 1, on the Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act. I want you to know what it means to be placed on Schedule 1. Schedule 1, and this is the law as it sits today. Schedule 1 drugs are substances defined as drugs that have a high potential for abuse, drugs or other substances that have no currently accepted medical use in treatment in the United States, and substances for which there is a lack of accepted safety for use or the drug or other substance under medical supervision. Now, we, of course, have continued to prove over and over that all forms of cannabis do not meet this definition. And I am so happy to tell you that at least for the hemp parts of the hemp aspect of the cannabis plant, they are no longer on the Controlled Substances Act in any schedule whatsoever. So in 2014, what happened was we passed the 2014 Farm Bill, and there was just a little interesting 2-page double-spaced amendment within there called the Legitimacy of Industrial Hemp Research. And that legitimacy of industrial hemp research defined 2 things. It defined the words industrial hemp, which did not exist as a legal definition, thereby distinguishing hemp from other forms of cannabis. And it also created a term called agricultural pilot programs, which are pilot programs to study the growth, cultivation, and marketing of hemp. And it allowed institutions of higher learning and state departments of agriculture in states that had passed legislation or that were willing to pass hemp legislation, gave them authority to, 1, to promulgate rules to create these agricultural pilot programs, and 2, for the institutions of higher learning to start to grow hemp. Tremendous asteroids hitting meteors, because the definition of industrial hemp was any part of the hemp plant, and the DEA kept saying, no, not any part of the hemp plant, not the flowering tops and the leaves. And there was all of this just complete debate and legal debate between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, because the legislative branch, the Congress folks, said, we know what we intended when we created that definition, and we definitely were including the flowering tops and the leaves and the resins because we understand that cannabidiol is going to be so important to jumpstart the oilseed and fiber aspects of this industry. Then you had the executive branch, the Drug Enforcement Administration, saying, no, we pat you on the head, Congress, for making that definition, but we disagree with your definition. And then it took the hemp industry, the people, to bring it to the judicial branch to try to work it out. And there was a case that was brought before the Ninth Circuit. In any event, thank goodness, while all of this asteroids hitting meteors and legal enmeshment and insanity is going on, and Zalise is getting in there to help try to work it out and create a regulatory framework and a legal, lawful framework that would liberate all parts of the hemp plant, specifically including the cannabinoids and extracts and derivatives. So while all of that was happening, the 2018 Farm Bill, of course, was being drafted. And ultimately, the 2018 Farm Bill then removes hemp entirely from the Controlled Substances Act, takes it out of an agricultural pilot program, and puts it into the bright light of day, reclaiming its very proud place with the rest of the United States legal agricultural commodities. And that's where we sit today. So if we just review this legal status, this incredible journey that this amazing plant has come from, check it out, guys. 1619, everyone must grow hemp. 1763, you must grow hemp or you're going to jail if you don't grow hemp. 1937, you must apply and pay a special tax to grow hemp. 1942, we really need you to grow hemp. 1970, don't you dare grow hemp. I neglected to say, guys, that the 1970 Controlled Substances Act, there was no pathway anymore to tax and regulate any form of cannabis. It became a straight up felony even to have in your possession a hemp seed capable of germination. In other words, a hemp seed that would grow. So when we say don't you dare grow hemp, I'm talking the shackles were put on this plant to the nth degree. So, but we're coming up to the present. All this work, I've been involved in this movement since 1990, and look what happens when a small group of people get together. That's how all the magic on the planet happens, and certainly here in this great country where people get to be the leaders of the leaders. So make trial of hemp and study its growth and marketing. And now please grow hemp again as an agricultural commodity. I'm paying attention to time here, guys. It was really important for me to focus on the history. So there are many more slides, but I will eventually need to cut myself off here at 12:45. So I'm going to go a little bit quickly, and there may be some slides that I skip in favor of making sure that you get the ones that I really want to make sure we can talk about. So let's talk about for a second about what is regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture describes farming and grazing practices that, among other benefits, reverse climate change by rebuilding soil organic matter and restoring degraded soil biodiversity, resulting in both carbon drawdown and improving the water cycle. If we do not turn to regenerative agricultural practices, guys, we are all going to die. I don't mean to be dramatic, and I'm happy to say it with a smile on my face. But without those top 6 inches of soil and rainfall and farmers, we're all dead. So the planet's in trouble. Newsflash. Even the United States Department of Agriculture, which, by the way, just was announced yesterday, just put $146 million into research grants among different universities. Hemp is included, by the way. Central University is doing is getting 10 million of that 146 because we have got to, we can no longer continue to treat our land and our soil and our atmosphere and our water supply the way we have been, or we're all going to die. Key environmental benefits of hemp cultivation when proper and regenerative agronomic practices are employed. Noting here that, of course, further research is needed because we have different climates. We have different photoperiods. Photoperiods, of course, meaning how long the sun, how long is the daytime, how long is the nighttime. All of these things, different climates, everything. So we're researching. Having said that, hemp is an extremely fast-growing crop. I'm talking between 70 to really 160 or so days, depending on where you are and what type of hemp you're growing. And it produces more fiber yield per acre than any other source. So we don't need weeds or herbicides, generally speaking, when hemp is properly grown. While it's a little wimpy as it emerges from the soil, it very quickly becomes tall and chokes out all the other weeds because the canopy from the hemp just does not allow those other weeds to grow. Pests and pesticides, while it is true that we have certain regions of the country that are experiencing incredible pests, grasshoppers and so on and so forth, we have other regions of the country not experiencing any, but there's lots of research going on with pests and hemp. And in fact, in putting hemp into your current rotation actually helps break the pest cycle that farmers of other crops are currently experiencing. Now, while hemp is a very hungry crop, the reality is that if you treat things correctly, you use cover crops, you're using rotation with nitrogen fixing crops such as alfalfa and legumes, other pulse crops, of course, then you're not going to need to use all of that fertilizer. And there are other ways that you can even harvest the crop that also creates, it replenishes those nutrients as well. Now, taproots, very deep taproots. I want you to look at those roots, guys, and what that means for being able to break up the soil and also to be able to reach into other areas of water that other crops cannot reach because they don't have those deep taproots. Those taproots also leave tremendous organic matter in the soil after the crop is harvested. Just really great for the soil here and wonderful for water usage as well. Now, bees and pollinators. we are having a really big problem with our agricultural scheme, with our climate, in that we are losing bees. If we don't have bees, I should actually add that to my happy little news about the 6 inches of soil and farmers and rainfall and bees. Without the pollinators, we are screwed, you guys. So the fact is that when hemp is really starting to be in its harvested state, it becomes another new source for our pollinators when they are being starved for pollen because those other crops have been harvested. So it's just tremendous what it's doing for our pollinators. Now, hemp is also, we never would grow hemp for cannabinoids or for its grain for consumption purposes on contaminated soil. But for contaminated soil, hemp is tremendous in cleaning up that contaminated soil. Obviously, forest conservation, guys, anything trees can do, hemp can do way better and with far less toxins. And it's great carbon sequestration. We're talking about a crop that is locking carbon in as it's growing, and then it's locked that carbon in the products that it's made after the crop is harvested. And then, of course, when we talk about pollution, I mean, and we'll get into that as I'm about to speak about paper for you. So dioxins in the paper supply, obviously recycling and biodegradability. I do want you to know that people think that just if it has hemp in it, oh, it's hemp plastic, it's automatically biodegradable. Please keep your critical thinking hats on, guys. Hemp can be blended with the most toxic things in the world, and it can be blended with the most natural things in the world. The point is, we want hemp to start being blended in everything, because even if it's blended in toxicity, it's less toxic than it was before the hemp. But just bear in mind that nothing is automatically anything just because it has hemp in it, particularly if it's of an industrial product. So it bears repeating here as we do a very quick run through of the vitalizing and many industries of hemp, that America has been and remains today the largest importer of raw hemp materials and manufactured hemp goods in the world. We've just been handing the competition over. We've been handing the industry and the money over to the competition for all of these years. So the hemp seed, highest digestible form of protein in the entire human and animal kingdom, more than soy, more than whey, more than beef, more than chicken. And why is that? Because the hemp seed has no trypsin inhibitors. Trypsin inhibitors are properties that prevent our bodies from absorbing protein, and those other forms of protein have trypsin inhibitors. Additionally, hemp has a full profile of amino acids. It lacks a little bit of lysine, but we can get lysine fairly easily in other food sources. So amino acids, of course, also are required to metabolize that protein. And finally, generally speaking, and everything is generally speaking with hemp, there are different sizes of hemp seeds. There are different varieties of hemp seeds with different nutritional profiles. But generally speaking, additionally, 10 grams of hulled hemp seeds, which is about 3 tablespoons, depending on the size of those hulled hearts, will give you 10 grams of digestible protein. 3 tablespoons of hulled hemp seeds, generally speaking, will give you 10 grams of digestible protein. And that protein, about 60% of it is what is called Ediston protein. Ediston protein is a globular protein, which is more easily assimilated and metabolized and absorbed by the body, as opposed to these fibrous proteins that comprises the soy, whey, beef, and chicken. So very, very important. Also, the perfect ratio of omegas 3s and 6s, which is very important. If you get too much omega-6, that can be toxic to the body. So to have this perfect ratio of 3 and 6 is very important. A full day's supply, by the way, of those omegas 3s and 6 you can get from those very same 3 tablespoons of hemp seeds that you're getting your 10 grams of protein. And then finally, something interesting, although there's so much, so I'll say finally for now, but something particularly interesting that I learned just when I thought I knew everything about the hemp seed is that there are only 2 substances, 2 natural nuts or seeds on the planet that do this. It's the green pumpkin seed and raw green pumpkin seed and the raw hemp seed that leaves a alkaline ash in the bloodstream to help promote a healthier pH balance in the bloodstream. Just phenomenal stuff. So I could go on all day. I love hemp grain. Obviously, human and animal body care. We're looking at our own products there. Hemp seed oil is the closest thing by the way, to human sebum. And it's a wonderful emollient and a tremendous carrier of other properties. Hemp seed oil is pretty tremendous stuff. And then clearly, obviously, cannabinoids for body care. And then phytocannabinoids, ingestible phytocannabinoids we see here, tremendous. I think it's important for those who do not know that in 2001, although it was applied for in 1999, the United States government was granted a patent. It's the Department of Social and Health Services for the United States. And you can do it yourself. You can look at US patent on CBD or USPTO, which is the US Patent and Drug, United States Trademark and Patent Office, USPTO patent on CBD. It's important that you understand that the United States is well aware of the medical value of cannabis because it owns a patent, and it has since 2001, on cannabidiol as a neuroprotectant and antioxidant. Moving on, paper. Here you see a bulletin number 404 from 1916 from the USDA. That's the researcher Leicester Dewey, who grew hemp to study its ability to make paper. By the way, not because we didn't know everything had been paper. For goodness sake, the very first Constitution issue of the Declaration of Independence or draft of it was hemp. We wanted to really get some serious science down in the United States on exactly the production capability and capacity of hemp herd. So Leicester Dewey grew his fields where, by the way, a corner of the United States Pentagon now sits on a piece of Leicester Dewey's fields where he did this research. And this is where Leicester Dewey realized that hemp produces 4 times more paper per acre than trees. Bear in mind, that's over a 20-year period. So if you took an acre of trees and grew that for paper, it would take approximately 20 years. And if you took that same acre and grew hemp over and over each year, it's a very fast growing crop. By the end of those 20 years, you'd have 4 times more paper from the hemp than you would from the trees. Additionally, if you punch a tree, guys, you're going to hurt your hand. That tree is hard. It is full of lignin, and lignin is what gives plants its rigidity and other protective properties. It's also a very hard, sticky, brown substance. So when we choose to use wood cellulose, because there's a patent on it, to make paper, we require a ton of dioxins. First of all, we have to use a lot of chemicals to break down all of the things that make a tree so hard. All of that needs to be broken down with very harsh chemicals. Then we're left with this dark brown pulp that needs to be bleached with dioxins, which poison the water supply so that we can have this white paper that then is so toxic by the time it comes to us that it's not really recyclable for very long, and it doesn't last very long. So hemp paper can be made recyclable 100 more times than tree paper. It can be made to be acid free. We don't need to use any bleach, zero, no dioxin, no bleach. We can all get used to cream colored paper instead of bleached white paper. Textiles, yarn, and cordage. Hemp doesn't grow out, it grows in, guys. Your garment is going to last for decades. The hemp weaves keep you warm in the winter. They keep you cool in the summer. They can be made by using absolutely every other blend of fabric that you want, from the most toxic to the most natural. Thousands of blends of these fibers. Car parts and biocomposites. Clearly, everything old is new again. You've already seen for yourself. And if you could see that Popular Mechanics magazine, the article goes on to show all of the different parts of Henry Ford's car that were made with these biocomposites, which of course they were not called biocomposites at the time. But even, and this is an old picture, so you're aware that BMW 3 and 5 series manufactured in Germany, that picture is like 6 years old now. I should be embarrassed. I need a new picture. But the European Union is under a lot more, and I hope we get there, under a lot more pressure than we are through their government, recognizing climate change, to reduce carbon emissions. So the BMW realized that by replacing just that door liner with this biocomposite, which is a hemp and calf blend, it reduced the overall weight of the car by 5 kilograms, which reduces carbon emissions. So All over the world, people are changing to hemp car parts. Even Toyota in Lexington, Kentucky is doing the same. Okay, running down here, we're in the final stretch before I get cut off for our European call here. Building materials, guys. This is the number one way to impact the planet, is for us to start using hemp in our building materials. Of all of the many products that can be made of hemp, and you know how I love my cannabinoids, hempcrete is my absolute favorite one. I spend a lot of time in my free time working on the hemp building industry. Hempcrete is an insulation. It's not like concrete. It cannot touch the ground. It is a mold, rot, fire and pest resistant insulation that, depending on how big your thick your wall is, whether it's 6 or 18 inches, and that would be determined by how close you are to an equator or a pole, so extreme temperature, with good windows, the interior of your home or your building is going to stay at about 60 degrees Fahrenheit all year round without any heating or cooling supply. This is not some crazy smoke I'm blowing up on anybody's skirt, guys. This is a thousands of years old building material. We have hundreds and hundreds of hempcrete projects all over the world. They're going up crazy in Europe. We have several in the United States, over 50 now. In fact, you're seeing that yellow building is the very first fully permitted hempcrete home that was built. I am proud to say I did the workshops for Hemp Technologies who built this home, and it was built for the mayor of Asheville, North Carolina. Okay, hemp board, another building material, guys, just like particle board, only we don't want to use it any place where it's going to get wet. Its compatibility as a substrate for laminate and veneers, you just have to make sure you're getting the right stiffness, but it is tremendous strength. And it meets or exceeds Andy's requirements for particle board. Hemp wood is a product that is taking the world by storm. This is actually flooring and dimensional lumber sold by Hempwood out of Murray, Kentucky, which uses biomimicry to create this stronger than oak building material. And it is beautiful, you guys, absolutely beautiful and deforable. Then we've got industrial oil here, varnishes, sealants, and coatings. Tremendous. They penetrate wood. They have natural UV protection. They last longer because they're not just sitting, just like the cosmetics with hemp seed oil can just sit on your skin. So do these sealants and coatings. They just sit on the wood as opposed to soaking in and really delivering the rest of the properties within that product. Moving on here, I'm going to not talk to you about pyrolysis. We're going to get to the end. Energy, fuel, pellets, and charcoal, guys. This is one of the most methane producing biomasses in the world, hemp. We can also, of course, make biodiesel from that very valuable seed, but it's too valuable to be used as fuel. So we prefer not to use that for seed. Of course, charcoal we can make with hemp. It has more BTUs than other celluloses, and even wood pellets. It burns cleaner than wood, and also it has the same BTUs as wood. So tremendous. We can really, truly, and totally change the world with this amazing product. And how can, with this amazing plant, and how can we all make a difference? We can eat hemp, wear hemp, use hemp, build with hemp, innovate with hemp, and create hemp markets by selling hemp products. You guys, thank you so much for listening and for paying attention to what this incredible plant can do. Nothing makes me happier than to sing the song of hemp and share this information with you.